So my name is Shabnam Mogharabi, and as Shannon so kindly introduced me, I run a company called SoulPancake. And I'm here today to talk to you guys about the rise of impact entertainment. I'm going to get into the definition of what impact entertainment is in a moment. But essentially, we wanted to explore what we are calling a new emerging category in the content space. What we are seeing and what we've been seeing at SoulPancake and what I think a lot of folks in the content space have been seeing for the past year is that there are two pulls right now on us. One is that a lot of brands are really interested in getting into traditional entertainment. Feature films, documentaries, episodic television, even short form content, podcasts, really truly getting into the traditional entertainment space as a vehicle to connect with audiences, given that cable numbers are down, advertising is being tuned out, how do we actually engage and connect with audiences? So there's this pull towards traditional entertainment that's happening. Simultaneously, as we've all heard over and over again, even though I think it's a little bit of an overused word, there is a pull towards brand purpose, right? Really truly thinking about what do we stand for, what is our why, how do we actually differentiate ourselves in terms of our mission, our social good work, taking CSR out of its traditional silo and really integrating it through the entire business, whether that's in marketing and leadership or whatever forms of it looks like. So these two poles of interest in traditional entertainment and driving towards creating content that is about mission and purpose and what is my why as a brand. These two factors have been happening for the last year, 2 years, 5 years, very consistently. What we are now seeing is that there is an intersection of those two things happening. How can brands use traditional entertainment, not branded content, but traditional entertainment to actually better tell their social good or impact narratives? And that emerging category of content is what we were seeing lots of folks coming and knocking on our door and asking about, and we decided to do a survey about it. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the results of the survey, but before I get into that and I get more into impact entertainment, I'm going to tell you a little bit about SoulPancake, because some of you might be wondering, what is a SoulPancake? It is not an actual pancake. We are a content studio. We're a content studio that I started about roughly 10 years ago with the actor Rainn Wilson. Rainn Wilson played Dwight Schrute on The Office. For those of you who are Office fans, he played that annoying, weird character that everyone loves to hate and hates to love. Beats Battlestar Galactica, right? Beats Bears and Battlestar Galactica. So Rainn and I started talking 10 years ago about the need for creating a content studio, as he was getting well known, that would create positive, uplifting, meaningful content about the human experience. How could we actually break through what we were seeing online and on television, which was frankly a lot of crap, and make something that was more uplifting and positive? And we went out and tried to get everyone on board with this. We were talking to networks, we were talking to agents, we were saying, hey, we want to create positive, uplifting content. Let's show you some examples of our stuff. People were in tears. They're like, this is amazing. I want to share it with my mom, but we're not going to work with you. And we were like, wait, why? And we were told over and over again that nobody wanted positive content, that positive content doesn't get any attention. People want drama and stakes and Kardashians. That's really what sells. So we just started making the content ourselves. And I think in the last decade, what we've seen is that there is actually a hungry audience out there who wants hope, who wants light in the darkness, who wants to be uplifted with the stories that they hear. And so that was kind of the impetus for us to make SoulPancake. So I'm going to play a 1-minute video really quick to give you a sense of who we are. And I'll tell you a little bit about our parent company as well. And then we'll dive into the survey results. So I'm going to play this quick video.
I think we all need a pep talk.
SoulPancake was created to explore what it means to be a human being.
I swear to God, I feel like someone planted us here for this reason.
Destiny.
We are always looking for the best version of ourselves.
You guys are asking some deep questions. This is deep.
You know that I have a great discomfort with that.
That's why I wanted to talk to you.
We knew that there was an audience out there that want to make the world a better place.
No way! What?
Ready? SoulPancake is a creative tribe that wants to squash cynicism and be unapologetically positive.
And the reason is because we give a damn.
Life, love, family.
Gotta love it.
Happiness.
Come on, come on.
You can't be stressed after sitting in a box full of kittens.
You name it, it's at SoulPancake.
You're never going to be happy with what you get unless you're happy with what you have.
Let's make stuff that matters.
So I always get nervous when that video plays that I'm wearing the same shirt that I was in that interview. It's also always fun where after, a 30-minute interview, the only thing they use of you is you cursing, and you're like, really? That was what you decided to put in the video? So we built this company. We primarily focus as a content and entertainment studio in two spaces: television and episodic content and series, and short form content. And on the short form side, we distribute 100% digitally and have amassed 1 billion video views. We're the #1 publisher on YouTube, lifestyle publisher on YouTube. And we joke that we've created millions of ugly cries in this positive, hopeful, human connective content we make. So we're a division of Participant Media. If you don't know Participant Media, they make feature films and documentaries. They won 6 Oscars earlier this year with Roma and Green Book, RBG, and everything that they make is really very much so about good storytelling and how storytelling has the ability to create real-world impact. I think we are the only Hollywood studio that has 40 people who solely work in our social impact team, meaning what they do is they think about how can this content actually generate change in the world? How can we partner with the right NGOs, the right people on the ground, the right activists in the field who are actually doing this work, use our content to give them tools, arm them with the resources to amplify their voices, to actually generate real, meaningful change in the world. So from the days of Inconvenient Truth to today with RBG and the Equal Opportunity initiative that they did with the ACLU, we literally try to do this with almost half of the films that we produce as a company. So it's very much so in our DNA, this idea of impact entertainment. So I will start with diving into that. What is impact entertainment, and why did we want to study this? Why did we want to dig into this and learn about this and understand how these two poles for both purpose and traditional entertainment are coming together? So the way we defined impact entertainment for the purposes of the study that we did is it is leveraging traditional entertainment. So not branded content, not social graphics and assets, but truly traditional entertainment: film, documentary, television and episodic series, short form series, and podcasts. How do you leverage traditional entertainment to raise awareness about pressing issues, the why that we all care about, the things that we all are trying to really move the needle on from an issue area in order to generate meaningful, positive change? So leveraging entertainment to create change. That was kind of the definition of impact entertainment. And historically, this has been the realm of Hollywood. Companies like Participant that have for more than a decade really said, okay, how can we use our traditional entertainment to actually create positive change and tell stories that are about something? But what we've seen is that there's a massive rise right now happening amongst brands and agencies in this space. And I think there's 2 real reasons for it. I mean, obviously, we've all heard of the rise of the conscious consumer. We've all heard of this consumer that with their dollars is casting their votes in terms of who they want to support as a brand, as a product, as a service. Simultaneously to that, I think that the world is becoming far more commoditized. I think that we will, in the very near future, see a world where instead of, wanting toothpaste X or toothpaste Y, I want Crest or I want Colgate, we aren't going to care as much anymore what the brand is. What we're really going to care about is how fast can Amazon or Walmart get it to my house for the cheapest price. And in that world, how do we as brands differentiate ourselves? How do we actually stand out in a world where the actual brand doesn't matter anymore if I can get it delivered to me as quickly as possible? Now, the other force that we're seeing, I think, at play is that, especially amongst millennials and Gen Z, there is a decline in their interest in politics and in the trust of politics. So they are less likely to trust politicians and the government to actually advocate for and work on their behalf and solve the world's problems. Huge, massive 10x decline amongst millennials and Gen Z in their trust and faith in government. So when that's happening, corporations, I think, have a huge opportunity. I think that actually creates a giant white space for corporations to say, the world is getting more commoditized. No one's going to care if it's X brand or Y brand because they just want it delivered as fast as possible for the cheapest price. Simultaneously, the emerging, rising consumer cares less about, or doesn't actually think that the government cares about them and can solve the world's problems. So they are turning their dollars, their social voices, their energy towards actually advocating corporations to step up. They're saying, you guys have the resources, you guys have the access, you guys have the worldwide reach. How can you guys actually step up and lead in the face of this change? And you see it when, something happens with Uber and people like jump online and they say, I'm not going to go to Uber anymore. I'm going to drive Lyft. Or, you see that when United treats a passenger poorly and the social media, engines rev up. These things are happening where audiences are standing up and saying, no, I want my brands and my corporations to stand for something more. And so in this commoditized world where consumers are looking to brands to lead and corporations to lead, I think that we've leaned into purpose and social good as a way to differentiate, to say, hey, this is why we are different. This is how you can be attracted to us. Unfortunately, I think purpose has been getting a bad rap in the last couple of years. I think everyone's overusing the word. They don't quite know what it means. I actually don't like using the word purpose. I like using the phrasing of know your why. And I also think that this idea of purpose has been conflated a little bit with saving the world, right? Like, my purpose has to be to save starving children or solve world hunger or fix climate change. And that's not necessarily what purpose or knowing your why is, right? Knowing your why can be as simple as we exist to make our consumers laugh. We exist to give our consumers, a safe and healthy environment, right? It doesn't have to be saving the world. So I think that's gotten a little conflated, and I think as a result, there's been a lot of purpose washing, greenwashing, woke washing. Alan Jope, the CEO of Unilever, issued an open letter earlier this year, just before Cannes Lion, where he said, there is this kind of crazy greenwashing, woke washing, purpose washing happening right now in the brand and corporation, in the corporate world, and how do we actually try to find the real, genuine, resonant ways that our brand can stand for something. So there's all of these forces at play, right? Now, what we noticed in the last year is that we were getting a lot of people coming to us because, we work in, with participant in traditional films and documentaries, with us in traditional television and short form content. And we were getting a lot of brands coming to us and saying, hey, we want to be in traditional entertainment. We've experimented here and there, but we really also want to kind of better define our social good and purpose work. Can we do something that marries those two things? And this has been kind of our world for a decade, and all of a sudden there were brands and companies saying, oh, we really want to get into this space of marrying these two forces. How can we do that with you, and how can we work with you? And so we said, you know what, let's actually gauge, let's actually get a sense of what is happening in the industry and who is interested in this subject. What does that actually mean? Do they define impact entertainment the same way? How do they think about being a good citizen? How do they think about leveraging the traditional entertainment vehicles to achieve those goals? And so we commissioned a study, so Participant and SoulPancake, in partnership with Brand Storytelling, commissioned a study by the Harris Poll. And we went out and we conducted this survey, and alongside we did a number of qualitative interviews with folks in the brand and agency world, and we wrote a white paper as a result of this. So we actually ended up getting more than 500 respondents to this survey, 25% of which were in the C-suite. So almost a quarter of the participants were in the C-suite. And all of these participants were at least a manager level or higher in their companies. They worked in the cross-section of departments: marketing, CSR, PR and communications, content creative, and the C-suite. And these 500 respondents answered, nearly 70 questions around this space. And actually, Harris Poll said it was one of the best responded to surveys that they had. So I really think it's tapping into something that I think a lot of people are thinking about. So let's dive into it. And I know nobody likes to hear a bunch of data points and a lot of numbers. So I'm just going to focus on the 3 things that I thought were the most interesting that came out of this study on impact entertainment. And then I'll give you a couple of quick case studies that will illustrate exactly what we're talking about. So the first thing that we learned is that indifference is not an option. So what was really interesting was, as we talked to and interviewed everyone, and what the survey results came out, is that, and these are the percentages out of the C-suite respondents only, so that quarter that were just C-suite respondents, they actually believe the brand values are more important than quarterly financial results, and that staying silent is actually worse than being controversial. So even 5-6 years ago, does anyone remember the Cheerios ad that was the multiracial couple, right? And how much of a controversy that created, and people were like, stay in your lane, Cheerios, and Cheerios, to their credit, said, no, we celebrate all types of families. This was only 6-7 years ago, and that controversy was something brands were afraid of. And yet, what's happening now is that brands are saying, actually, no, staying silent is worse than being controversial. We actually have to stand up and speak for our brand values. It's actually riskier not to. And that ultimately, if you are indifferent to society's struggles, it will not only hurt your brand performance, but it will actually hurt your financial performance. So it was really interesting to see how starkly, how highly all of the participants came out saying, no, brand value is actually wildly important, and particularly in the C-suite, we see that the impact on our financial performance can actually be really detrimental. And I think this validates what a lot of us feel and what a lot of us have heard at conferences and events that we've been at, and yet we haven't really been able to articulate, but it really validates that this is something that people are hungry for and believe that it is of business value to their organizations. So the second thing that I thought was really interesting coming out of this is that there's actually a clear information gap in two areas. One area is between the C-suite, where there is this perception that it is important to talk about brand values, otherwise it's a financial risk, and the lower levels of the company, and also, how do you actually get into traditional entertainment and impact entertainment? We don't even know where to start in thinking about that. So those are kind of the two information gaps we saw. So 7 in 10 of the C-suite support investing in impact entertainment. They think that traditional entertainment vehicles can be an effective way to talk about brand values, society's issues that they care about or that align with their why. And yet, when you look at the gap, there is 10 to 15 percentage point differences between the C-suite perception of why there is a strong business case to invest in this area and to invest in brand values and invest in purpose and mission versus the rest of the organization. So this is a leadership conversation that's happening, which I think is really interesting. There was a letter that Larry Fink sent out a couple years ago, January 2018. Larry Fink is the CEO, the chairman of BlackRock. BlackRock is the world's largest asset manager and investor, and he sends a letter out every January to his CEOs of all of his companies. So this letter in January 2018 said that if companies don't have social purpose and don't stand for something, that it will be detrimental to their future success. And he wrote this kind of as a paragraph in the letter, and all year in 2018, people were saying, was Larry Fink serious? Was Larry Fink serious? Is that actually what he wanted to say? Did he really mean that we have to have social purpose? And so in January 2019, you can find both these letters online, his BlackRock letter said, oh, actually, not only was I serious about the social purpose thing, but my whole letter is going to be about why it's important for corporations to invest in their social good and purpose work. So this gap is really a leadership gap. Leadership is talking about this. Leadership is thinking about this. Leadership is seeing the writing on the walls, and yet the information isn't yet traveling down the channels to the director and manager level. So there's a clear communication gap. In addition to that, there's a challenge where no one knows where to start. They recognize that entertainment is how consumers are connecting right now around content. Traditional entertainment is where consumers are going. They also recognize they need to be doing purpose and impact work, but what they don't understand is how to get started. And interestingly, 58% said the biggest challenge is convincing the C-suite to make the investment, and yet we just saw that the C-suite actually thinks it's a good idea. So again, that gap is really highlighted, which I think is really, really interesting. So the third thing that I wanted to highlight out of the research is the purpose gap. So like I said, I think that purpose washing, greenwashing, woke washing, I think this term is being very overused right now. And I think it has been conflated with saving the world, and that's not necessarily what it means. It can mean that. It can absolutely mean that. And if that is what your brand or your company stands for, then absolutely that should be your purpose. But there is a gap, particularly when it comes to results and when it comes to the KPIs that are measured out of impact entertainment. So when we asked, when you think about impact entertainment, when you think about combining traditional entertainment and your purpose and social good work, what are the KPIs that you measure? What are the results you're looking for? Brand awareness, brand loyalty, audience engagement, were amongst the highest responses. Makes a ton of sense. But what was somewhat lower was positive change for the issue or the impact area they were focused on. Only 38% of the respondents said, oh, well, we actually care that there's a positive change on that issue. That's a huge gap. That is why that inauthentic dissonance is happening for people around, well, you say you're about purpose and you put out an ad about your purpose, but really is it doing any good? Well, if we don't measure the good that it does, how can we actually point to that work and say that it is authentic with what we're doing? So this, to me, is a big challenge to this room and to folks working in marketing. The challenge is, how do you leverage traditional entertainment, impact, and social good work? How do you leverage those two things, not just to create brand awareness and loyalty, because yes, we are in a commoditized world and we have to differentiate through that, but how do we also authentically measure and track the impact of the work we're doing so that we can actually point to it and say, no, there isn't a gap between what we're saying and what we're doing. There isn't a gap between what the message is that we're putting out there and the actual impact that we're having in the world. So this purpose gap, I think, is more of a call to arms, like a let's rally people, because if we don't measure that, it's going to be a problem long term. And consumers will sense it, and they will, their spidey senses are up, and they will say, nah, I'm not interested in that. So I really think it's a challenge to us to really think about the impact on the issue or the social good work we're doing as an actual KPI that we need to measure. So we did some qualitative interviews after this. So we surveyed these 500 participants, and then we went out and we interviewed more than 15 people in the industry, did some deep interviews with them. And we said, okay, so if this is if these are the challenges and these are the takeaways, how can we actually then turn around, and what are the tips that you can provide to actually make this a more resonant, authentic part of the work, close that purpose gap in a lot of ways? And the three kind of recommendations that really came out of it were to be thoughtful, be committed, and be about the long game. So I'm going to explain what each of those means. So being thoughtful about it means being very intentional and really truly making sure that your decisions aren't in response to what's happening in the world, right? If you remember, there was a Super Bowl, not this year, but last year. It was right after a lot of things happened in terms of politics around, the border and the wall and immigration and the Muslim ban, and all of these things were happening. And the Super Bowl ads 2 years ago, essentially we're all together, we're all one people, we support immigrants. Everyone jumped on the bandwagon of that issue of the hour, right? So there wasn't a thoughtfulness for brands to say, am I just jumping on a bandwagon? Or is this actually authentically resonating with who we are? We have to be intentional about it, not just jump on what the latest conversation is in the zeitgeist. So the second element that was brought up in these qualitative interviews was to be committed. And what that means is that it can't just be a conversation at the leadership level. It can't just be a conversation that happens in a CSR department or a marketing department and then a campaign runs, and that no employees, no folks know what to do. I'll give an example of a project we worked on with Panera. It was a series, a 6-part series that we did with Panera. It had celebrity chefs in it, and it was all about kind of the future of food and such. And Panera had actually spent the last 5 years working on the future of food issues before they actually came out and said they wanted to do a campaign around this. So a lot of people don't know this. When they think about kind of a fast casual restaurant that's about non-GMO, et cetera, they think about Chipotle and, there's no hormones and so on and so forth. But Panera's been doing some amazing stuff. They've been advocating the FDA to define an egg as an egg, because sorry for those of you who love Starbucks and Dunkin' Donuts, that's not an egg in your egg sandwich. So they've been doing advocacy there. They do locally sourced produce. They do all sorts of really interesting stuff. They're labeling their sugar in terms of teaspoons, not grams, because Americans have no idea what a gram of sugar is, but they get teaspoons. So they're really trying to be transparent and thinking about the future of food. And they actually went through over the last 5 years and made sure that all their workers in their restaurants, store managers, everyone in the company knew what they were doing in the food space before they turned around and started talking about it publicly with the series that they did with us and the social social campaign. We did a partnership with Huffington Post. We did a bunch of social good work with the American Diabetes Association. But before any of that happened, they had taken the work to, in a committed way, make sure everyone in their organization knew about how they were thinking about the future of food. If you're not committed at every level of the organization, it doesn't work. And the last thing is to really be about the long game. And what I mean by that is that so many of the folks we talked to said that, well, whenever we do a social good campaign or whenever we do anything in the purpose space or the impact space, it's like, here's our budget. We want to run this campaign. We're going to run it for 3 months, and then we want to see what the impact is, right? And if you're running a campaign around impact or purpose that has a 3-month window for your ROI or your KPIs, then you're missing the point. Because unfortunately, purpose and impact work, knowing your why, social good, really leveraging entertainment to achieve those goals, that's a long-term horizon. Films and documentaries take 2, 3, 5 years to make. Impact work, if we're really thinking about the future of the consumer and what is going to engender loyalty from them over the long period, you can't measure a return in 3 months on that kind of work. Your targeted direct-to-consumer campaigns, how can I move this product? How can I move this, these services in this quarter around the holiday season? That has a short time horizon. But impact and purpose work, we have to learn as an industry to lengthen the time horizon that we look at. So that was the third thing that kind of came out of it. So in the last couple minutes that I have left here, I'm just going to share a couple of quick case studies that are from the world. These are not projects that SoulPancake worked on, and I intentionally wanted to do that to showcase work that I think really shows impact entertainment in its best form. So the first case study I'm going to talk about is from Johnson & Johnson called 5B. I think the name changed from Word 5B to 5B. But this is essentially a documentary feature that Johnson & Johnson funded, and it's about the nurses in the 1980s who worked in Ward 5B of San Francisco General Hospital, and they changed the way AIDS patients were treated. Essentially, in the 80s, AIDS was this nobody touches it, nobody looks at it, stay far away disease. And there was this group of nurses in San Francisco who said, no, we are about caring for patients, and we are going to find ways to connect with these patients, touch these patients, interact with these patients. And they really changed the way AIDS patients were cared for. So Johnson & Johnson funded this documentary feature, and they handed the direction and the creative control, and this is interesting, they handed the creative control over to their directors, an Oscar-nominated and Oscar-winning co-director pair. And they had them make this documentary. Now, alongside it, Johnson & Johnson did what it did best from an advertising perspective. It ran spots on iHeartRadio. It took elements of what nurses did in San Francisco and made a 30-second spot with it. But the actual documentary lived on its own. It won a Cannes Lion Entertainment Grand Prix. It was actually screened here at BrandStorytelling as part of Sundance this last January. And Brendan Gall, who at Studios, who worked with Johnson & Johnson on this, essentially said that, it's really part of this continuum. There is advertising, right? There is branded content, and then over here is the audience first story, right? What does the audience want to hear? And that is truly traditional entertainment. And Johnson & Johnson, all they got in this was a credit. Literally a credit. That was all that they got was Johnson & Johnson film. So there was no integration of product or logos or branding in the documentary. The second example I'm going to give you is from Airbnb. So Airbnb, their brand is all about belonging. That's their central mission, that you can belong anywhere. And they are very much so about this mission, and it really infiltrates everything they do from an advertising perspective. So they decided after the 2016 election to do a feature-length documentary because they found out that the San Francisco Gay Men's Choir, which is based in their headquarters city of San Francisco, was going on the road through the American South, and they were going to be doing a concert tour in the Deep South. And they said, this is an amazing story. We want to make a documentary about it because it really brings to life our mission of belonging. So the film won the Tribeca Film Festival Audience Award, and I'm going to play the trailer, the teaser, because it shows the only branding in the whole film that is Airbnb. The thing you'll see of an Airbnb production, that's it. That's the only mention. They didn't stay at Airbnbs, the choir, as they were traveling, and I'll tell you very quickly afterwards what happened.
There's a storm, and we have to learn to dance with the storm. the Gay Men's Chorus in San Francisco. You're going around the South promoting unity and peace.
I would have never thought to go back home.
I was 35 years old with a beautiful wife and children when I came out. No, you don't need to clap. It was shit.
The church said you're going to say goodbye to your kids and you're not going to come back.
No, you got to bring the fight to the South, Doug. That is never going to happen. Bunch of perverts.
It's really, really frightening.
This 83-year-old woman in this church, she came up to me and she said, I get it, and that was largely because you all were here.
I am loved. I made a quilt as a reminder that you will always find people, even in the most unlikely of places, that want to wrap you in the warmth of friendship and acceptance.
You have allowed me to come home.
Music heals. It's healing me.
So you can see this is really a story about belonging and about prejudice and discrimination, and the only attribution to Airbnb is that. Now, Airbnb is doing a lot of work with the San Francisco Gay Men's Choir. They're doing pop-up events. They're doing kind of a local cross-country tour where they're talking about issues of belonging and so on and so forth. So they're leveraging this piece of content to, on the ground, elevate their brand work, similar to how Johnson & Johnson did the film and then used it to elevate their support of nursing and how nursing changes lives in their advertising work. But I think these are great examples of where they let audience and creative have control. The creative owned the story. They made something compelling that people wanted to watch and showed up for. I mean, the Airbnb film won the Tribeca Film Festival Audience Award against Hollywood studios and Netflix films and so on and so forth. So when true content exists, it really draws people in. And if you can marry that with impact, I think there's something really powerful that can differentiate in the future. So this white paper that we did, you guys are all getting a copy of it. You'll be getting a USB drive, I believe, and you'll all be receiving a copy of it. I'm around if you have questions about the study or want to ask about it, but I really do think this is how, as an industry, we can step into this emerging white space. We can really differentiate our brands with forces that are at work changing that and to help differentiate the work that we're doing already. Thank you guys so much.